You're listening to the Love Over Addiction podcast. Hey, how are you? So we are going to continue this series of going over and kind of going into detail and explaining Alcoholics Anonymous's 12 steps. Now, if you've listened in the past, for the past couple weeks, you're going to probably get tired of me saying this, but for those of you that are new, first of all, welcome. I'm very, very glad you're here. But when I talk about 12 steps, it is in no way advocating or criticizing the steps. I'm not, I don't struggle with addiction, and so I have no personal experience with the 12 steps. The intention behind telling you about them, and typically we don't do this on this podcast, we just focus on you. We don't go into how to get them sober or statistics about addiction per se. We just love to keep the focus on you, what it feels like to love someone struggling with addiction. What are the pains? What are the fears? What are the hurts around that? But I wanted to dive in here because a lot of you, including me at one point when I was married to my ex-husband, really was curious about, okay, what would it look like if I knew they were getting sober for good? Like, what, in my fantasies, what does that look and sound like? And a lot of times we are convinced by addiction that we are crazy and that what we want or what we're asking for or our desires, our expectations for our relationship is unrealistic, or, we're just a pain in the butt for wanting too much, right? But these 12 steps come from, and they're written by two men who found kind of this community that live by this credo. And I think they advertise what it looks like to get sober. So it's a good way to measure if someone is really on the path of recovery. It's not the only way to measure, but it's one of the ways. And so when you're sitting there fantasizing about your relationship and the one you love getting better, you can paint an image in your head that's accurate and real by looking at these 12 steps. So that's the reason why I'm going over them. It really is tied back to you about when you should have hope again, when you can actually learn to trust them again. Trust is such a huge issue for the people in our community, right? It's like, when can we let our guards down? When can we believe that this time is really, really the time that they say they're going to get sober, and I can believe them? So we've gone through a bunch of steps today. I'm just going to combine step 8 and 9 because they're very similar. Now, you can Google the 12 steps, which is fine. You can also, we're going to make these, we started making these worksheets. They're kind of like writing prompts for you, and they're completely free. And every episode, we're going to try to create like a free way for you to take what I'm saying and apply it to your life, to make it personal for you. So if you would like that worksheet with the 12 steps and also just some questions at the end that will help kind of tie in this podcast, you can just get it for free. You go to our website, which is loveoveraddiction.com, and you can subscribe to the newsletter, which is free again, and you'll get these worksheets. So there's no need to take notes if you're like driving or exercising. or if you're just laying in the bed, relaxing. So we're going to cover step 8 and 9 of the 12 steps today. And they're kind of similar. Now, for those of you that are familiar with Alcoholics Anonymous, they have a book. They actually have several books, but their main book it's called the Blue Book. That's kind of like what it's called in the recovery world. And it's sort of like the Bible for AA. You typically take it to a lot of your meetings. I know a lot of people, I've seen them like highlight or sticky note this book, but this book is basically a detailed list. In the book goes over lots of things, but it goes over great detail of these steps. I'm going to read from it just for a little bit. It is free on the internet too, if you want to find that, but and read it. But I'm going to read part of this because steps 8 and 9 are very similar to each other. So let me just read step 8. It says, step 8 is made a list of all persons we have harmed and become willing to make amends to them all. So when I read step 8 to you, I can just hear you be like, yes, please. That would be lovely. I would love the person I love to make amends, direct amends with me and with everybody else they've hurt. I would love them to be honest and upfront with what they've done. That would be so refreshing, right? And then I also love that I love the word willing, because some people, and you guys know this when you love someone struggling with addiction, some people might not want to make amends. They might have your loved one might have crossed a line that is just your boundary, that is just too difficult. You can't work with that. Like, it just went too far. And so not everybody that's in your loved one's life might not want to hear, or your loved one try to make amends. They might want to sever ties. They might want to walk away from that relationship, or they might not be ready to really hear it yet. And that's okay, because remember, this is a family disease. It affects so many people, not just the alcoholic or addict. For every one alcoholic and addict, an average of 7 people are affected. And so not everyone's going to come back around. And just like the alcoholic or addict or substance user has the right to decide to get sober, or decide to relapse, or decide not to change, they have that right to do that. We have the right to decide whether we want to continue this relationship. We have the right to decide whether we're in the mood to talk, or whether we need to continue with a timeout. We have a right to pack our bags and say, okay, I'm going to take a little bit of a breather here. I need to remove myself from this very unhealthy home right now to reflect. You reserve the right to so many things, whether you want to have an intimate relationship with your loved one or not, whether you want to have a ring on your finger, and if you're engaged, and keep that ring on your finger, or whether you want to postpone your wedding, whether you want to have kids, whether you're willing to expose children to this potentially. You have a right to choose whatever feels best and healthiest for you when it comes to how you respond to this disease. Does that make sense? And they equally have the same right. So when you talk about step 8, when it says, your loved one is going to be making amends to people, if they make a list, if they follow step 8 and get a piece of paper and a pen, or get out an app on their phone and make a list of all the people that they've harmed, some of those people might not be interested in building back that bridge. And that's okay. We shouldn't force that. And you and I should not be like, working behind the scenes to make that happen. We don't need to be making calls on on behalf of our loved ones to apologize. Like, that's very tempting to do. I've done that before in the past, but that's not our place, right? It's between the person struggling with addiction and the relationships that they have. The only relationships that we need to be concerned about, that we need to kind of step in, is if we have minor children, or really, frankly, any age child. We do have, as a parent, the right to be a part of that situation. And also, obviously, we have a right to the relationship that our loved one that's struggling with addiction has with us. But other than that, there really is, everybody has their own autonomy and their own right to their own reactions in this situation. So let me read a little bit from the book. This is page 77, and it says, Step 8. Again, make a list of all persons we had harmed and be willing to make amends to them all. Okay, so this is what it says. Step 8 and 9 are concerned with personal relations. Wait, let me stop really quickly. I'm going to read you step 9 because it doesn't reference it. Step 9 is make direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And we're going to get to that in a little bit, but I just wanted you to have a reference point there, okay? First, we take a look backward and try to discover where we have been at fault. Isn't that interesting, guys? So literally it's saying take a look at your past and take responsibility. Be honest about trying to discover, making an effort about what's been your fault. That would be very refreshing, right? Next, we make a vigorous attempt, and I love the word vigorous there, vigorous attempt to repair the damage we have done. And third, having thus cleaned away the debris of the past, we consider how, with our newfound knowledge of ourselves, we may develop the best possible relations with every human being we know. Okay, that is a massive, massive paragraph. I mean, could you imagine if the one you loved actually did this? This is what we want. When you're fighting with your loved one or when you're crying over your broken heart, this is why your heart breaks. This is because underneath all of the layers of addiction, the core of your heart and soul wants this, because you know your intuition, your gut, your wisdom is telling you that this, what I just described, or what I just read from this book, these are the signs of healing from addiction. If your loved one behaved like this and followed these steps, I know that you would be like, yes, thank you. Oh my gosh, this is great. Let's have more of that. Yes, please. Right? Let me just read it to you one more time. Okay, so, and we can put this in the worksheet for you. Or you can just Google it. So first, we take a look backward and try to discover where we have been at fault. That's called taking responsibility, right? Next, we make a vigorous attempt to repair the damage we have done. And to me, if we just pause there for a moment, what does a vigorous attempt to repair the damage we have done mean, right? So this is like, and vigorous is like, it's work. Vigor is like, I should have looked up the definition, but to me, it means you are working your tushy off. You're not just quitting after somebody is like, gives you a hard time or tells you something you don't want to hear or doesn't answer the phone or respond to the text when you first reach out. Vigorous to me means consistently trying, making a real effort. And so what does that look like to you? Ask yourself this question. What if my loved one made a vigorous attempt to repair the damage that they have done to me, I would expect A, B, C, D to happen. Like, be specific so that you can have measurables. And this is really important. And again, this will be on the worksheet. I'll write this out for you so that you can just fill in the blanks. But the reason why I think it's so important for you to write this out is because when you have those moments of communication with your loved one, and remember, we go over when to talk to them. You know, there's times for you to keep a quiet mouth, and there's times for you to speak up for yourself and be an advocate for yourself and your family. And that's another podcast that's in the program. But so we're not going to cover that right now. But when you are choosing, when you're following the rules for how to communicate with them, a really good place to start is to be super, super clear with what you need from them to provide you hope. And you can grab this list and just say, hey, you know, I'm being very specific just so that you can have examples. Obviously, you don't need to do these 4 examples perfectly or even literally, but this is the gist of what I am looking for. This is what it will take for me to feel comfortable and trust you in your sobriety. That is so powerful because so many people I know, even people that don't struggle with loving someone that suffers from addiction, they don't let their partner know specifically what they need or want. And I don't understand that because, first of all, your partner can't know, like, a lot of times they're not mind reader. Well, a lot of times, maybe all the time they're not mind readers. I don't know, maybe there are some of those people out there, but I think for the most part, it would be a lot easier if you were just upfront. If they didn't meet your expectation, if they failed, or if they looked at you and was like, okay, you crazy lady, I'm not doing that, then that's fine. At least you know that they're not going to plan on doing it, but you've set the expectation. You really have advocated for yourself. You checked in with yourself to know what you want, instead of just walking around not quite sure and willing to get maybe some things you don't want, or hoping that they provide you with the things you want. Does that make sense? So I think it's really important for us to recognize our feelings, honor those, and use our words and be direct in a loving way, not in a, screaming crazy way. I'm not saying that all screaming makes you crazy, but I'm just saying it could be far more healthier if it was delivered in a way that was really responsible and thoughtful. Okay, back to the step 8, and we're going to just combine this with step 9 because they're basically the same thing. I want to continue with this book. So this is what they're saying. It's paragraph number 2. This is a very large order. It is a task which may perform with increasing skill, but never really finish. Learning how to live in the greatest peace, partnership, and brotherhood with all men and women of whatever description is a moving and fascinating adventure. Every AA has found that and just to pause here for a second, this book refers to, because it was written by 2 men, 4 men, they write in he, like everybody's a he. That's why. So every AA has found that he can make little headway in this new adventure of living until he first backtracks and really makes an accurate and unsparing survey of the human wreckage he has left in his wake. To a degree, he has already done this when taking moral inventory, and that was a previous step. But now the time has come when he ought to redouble his efforts to see how many people he has hurt and in what ways. This reopening of emotional wounds, some old, some perhaps forgotten, and some still painfully festering, will at first look like a purposeless and pointless piece of surgery. But if a willing start is made, then the great advantages of doing this will so quickly reveal themselves that the pain will be lessened as one obstacle after another melts away. You guys, is that not one of the greatest things ever? I loved this. This is brilliant because, first of all, I love the idea of redouble. Redouble your effort. Like, when we say in this community, we have work to do, which is like one of my favorite sayings, we do. Like, oftentimes, I think when people are new to our community, they are under the misunderstanding that all the work needs to be done by our loved ones because they're the ones with the problems. But I lovingly am here to challenge that belief system and say, First of all, we're not powerless. We're not just letting them run our lives and decide whether they want to get sober or not and make us feel a certain way and we're just helpless victims. That's not true. We can decide our own feelings. And also, we do have work to do. I mean, there is a reason why we were attracted to this relationship in the first place. There could be some underlying beliefs that we need to challenge within ourselves. Like we're not deserving enough of just plain love. Like we need to work really, really hard to prove and fix and mend and solve and hustle in order to get someone to fall in love with us. Some of us believe that like the man that or woman that fell in love with us is like a 9 out of 10 and we're a 3 out of 10. And we're just so lucky that they chose us, right? That's not true. That's a belief that I would sit there and go, heck no, you are a 9 out of 10. You might be a 10 out of 10. Who knows? But you're not a 3. These are things that we need to evaluate within ourselves so that we can become as equally happy and as equally healthy as the partner that we want to get sober. We have just as much work to do on ourselves. And it's not like I am not sitting here saying, oh my gosh, shame on you. Quite the contrary. A lot of the times, the work that we have to do is to figure out who we are, what we want, and what is absolutely special about us. And to actually begin to like ourselves, to gain the confidence so that we can surround ourselves with healthy people, right? So what I love about this step, going back, is again, to the purpose and the point of why we're going over these steps, is to say this is what it looks like and sounds like and feels like. These paragraphs that I've been reading, that's what it looks and sounds and feels like if your loved one is getting sober. So if you're sitting there and your loved one is not working, you don't see any work at all in them trying to get sober, then chances are you absolutely have every right to be worried or upset or angry or frustrated or disappointed or hurt. You do, because they're not following these very clear steps to sobriety. You're also, this is to loving reminder to you to say, you're not crazy for expecting this, what I just described, to happen. That's a reasonable expectation to ask your loved one to go back over all the hurts and pains that they have done. To say, I did this and it was terrible and I'm so sorry. Would you mind telling me how that made you feel? Would you mind going into detail about what specifically happened so that I can take ownership for this? Would you mind telling me how what I did caused you so much pain? because all I want to do is just sit and listen to this so that we can move forward together. That is not unreasonable to ask or request, right? And as Bill and Bill, who are authors of this book, wrote, it takes like effort. It takes vigorous attempts to repair. It takes you doubling down on efforts. It's not going to be smooth sailing. And if I can just lovingly also remind you, to set expectations for your loved one is great and good. And yes, because we need a measurable to know whether things are getting better or worse. That's the whole reason why, if we want to oversimplify it, that's the whole reason why I'm going into these steps. Is it's to gauge. It's to give you a gauge of, is it getting better? Are they really getting sober? Or is it staying the same or getting worse, right? You guys, I go on so many tangents. I forgot what my point was, and I can't rewind this to figure it out. Expectations. Okay, sorry. So here's the deal. Those are reasonable expectations to have. But the expectations that you put on yourself are also really important. Super important. So if you think, okay, my loved one is going to do step 8 and 9, and they're going to come to me and they're going to say something along the lines of, I've hurt you significantly. I apologize so much for that. Can we please go into specific details about certain instances where I've hurt you, because I want to understand. And I think it would help us both feel better so that I don't repeat the patterns in the future, and I can lovingly and honestly look you straight in the eyes and apologize from the deepest part of my heart that I'm so incredibly sorry for everything that I have caused you, and I am profusely grateful that you have stuck with me thus far. You have not abandoned me, and you've been patiently waiting for me to get sober, and hopefully today I want to give you that gift. I want to reward you for your loyalty by getting sober. So this is one way that a gift to you to allow me to recognize your voice and hear you, and also a gift to myself so that we don't repeat this in the future. Now, I just made that up, so your loved one might not say that exact specific thing. But if they do, here's the expectation that I want you to put on yourself, which is, if you want to take the fifth, plead the fifth, and you're like, I can't, I'm so sorry, but I need some time. This is unexpected. I'm so incredibly grateful that you are here in this space. I'm not there yet. And I don't want to misspeak, and I really want to be specific. So would it be okay with you if you gave me 48 hours, 72 hours to go and think about this? And then can we, reconvene on the couch with a cup of coffee on Thursday at 2:00 to discuss? That is a reasonable expectation of yourself, to not just jump right into this, to give yourself some space, some breathing room to process, and then to reciprocate. Another reasonable expectation that you can have on yourself is no bueno. Like, dude, sorry, I hear you, and I'm glad that you're trying to get sober, but this relationship is over. I apologize that I am not able to, open my heart to you, but it's been broken too many times. There's too many walls built up around me. I need some space to heal myself, and then perhaps we can have this conversation, several months or years from now. Like, if you've already left the premises, or you've already made up your mind that you're going to end this relationship, that divorce or a breakup is in your future, then this is one step. These steps are great, because whether you decide to stay or go, it is in your loved one's best interest to get sober with or without you. They need to take ownership of these steps themselves. And their what's the word I'm looking for? Their outcome is not dependent on your reaction to their program. and their work. Don't put that pressure on yourself where you are sitting there saying, I don't give yourself that much power or credit. You are not Jesus. You are not them. You are a fragile, loving, wounded human being. And you don't hold the key to their sobriety. You don't hold the key to their relapse. You're not holding the bottle up to their mouth with a weapon in your hand saying, drink or I'll hurt you. You are not going and meeting a drug dealer at 2:00 on the corner, exchanging money and coming home and lining up the whatever drug it is on the kitchen table and saying, before we can have any food, you need to ingest this. That's a ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous example I just made up, but you get the point. You are not forcing anybody. And if they are really, truly going to get sober for good and commit, it's not going to matter what your reaction is, good or bad. It's not going to matter what their parents or their bosses or their best friends' reaction are. That's why I think they used the word vigorously and to double down, or they didn't use double down, redouble. I think because what this book is saying is you got to set yourself up for the possibility that people have closed the door on your relationship. And these are all tests to see how serious are you? How serious are you of really getting sober? Because if you're really serious, if you want to get sober more than anything else in this world, and unfortunately, that's the type of commitment it takes to maintain sobriety. You have to want it more desperately than you want anything else. It is your number one priority in your life. It's not number 2, 3, or 4, whatever. It's number one. Then nothing, no one, no person, no event, nothing will get in the way of that. Now, I think when relapses happen is when people struggling with substance abuse kind of take their eye off the prize, right? Or they get a little too comfortable, or maybe a very traumatic instance has happened and they don't have the coping skills to manage. But you walking around thinking if your loved one is trying to get sober, that what you say or what you do will have an effect on their sobriety is unnecessary responsibility for you. That's too big of a burden to carry. Thank you. Too big of a burden to carry. It's not fair to you, because then you're just living like a hostage to the addiction, which is no better than living with somebody who's actively using. You're still the victim, and you're still placating to addiction. You're still allowing addiction to run your life. So you get to respond however you feel is right for you, whether that's a relationship or not, whether that's open-hearted conversation or needing some time. The only thing I would challenge you to do, if you can, and again, there's no judgment if you cannot, but a goal might be for you to consider the idea of communicating your feelings responsibly, respectfully, because you are a very dignified person. You are good. You've just been pushed to the brink. Everybody on this earth has bad qualities, negative qualities, present company included, right? We all do. And I think addiction can bring out those negative qualities on a regular basis. And so then we end up thinking, oh my gosh, all I am is these negative qualities, because that's all I'm showing. That's all I'm becoming. But it's not really you. You're not. Yes, it's a part of you. It's a part of me. There's no angels walking around here on earth that are just glorious and fabulous and have no problems whatsoever, right? No issues. But addiction sort of brings out the worst in everyone. It's horrible. It's messy. It's yucky. It's evil. It's mean. It's terrible. It's the worst. And so don't believe for a second that who you are is the worst. It's not. It's just that you've been living with this for so long that it feels like it because you can't remember how good you are, how responsible and dignified and kind and loving you really, really are. Which is ironic because it's the whole reason why addiction chose you in the first place. Because you are that kind, loving, sweet person, people struggling with addiction are very attracted to those qualities because it's like yin and yang, light and darkness, right? They know they can take advantage of that. So remember who you are originally. And if you can't remember, then let's reinvent the image of yourself. Let's come up with a new beginning. And who you are is a very dignified, respectful person who uses their words wisely, who, when they choose to speak, considers the feelings of everyone in the room. But most importantly, considers yourself. You consider yourself before speaking if the words that you use are actually going to hurt you, if they're going to be something you regret, right? So that's my challenge to you. And it's so hard because, like I said, this disease brings out the worst in us. So try to break that pattern. Try when you communicate. If you can't, walk out, like leave the room, vacate, hide in the bathroom. Get in your car, go away, call a friend. Come up with like exit strategies, right? Have those in your back pocket. Get on the floor and play with your kid. Go watch a movie. Whatever you need to do to escape those feelings of anger at that moment. And then, not that anger is bad, but then you need to process that anger. You need to work through that anger so that when you come back and make your point, and you could be standing up for yourself, it comes out as strong and centered and dignified. It's not you being a pushover. It's not you apologizing for things you don't need to apologize for. It's you standing your ground, being firm in who you are, and knowing what you want. That's the clarity that you need to funnel your anger or your feelings. And then guess what's going to happen? You're going to speak like that to them, and you're going to feel really proud. You're going to feel so proud of yourself that your confidence is going to start to build. You're going to reevaluate who you are, and all of a sudden, you're going to say, "Oh my gosh, I am very, very capable of having difficult conversations and not losing my cool. I am actually not this horrible person that addiction is trying to make me constantly feel. I am actually a very smart, wonderful, kind human being that's being put in an awful position that I did not ask for, that nobody knows how to understand or navigate or get through. And I am going to use this as an opportunity to better myself, to grow into the person that I know I was created to be. I'm going to use this and say, I've got it going on already, but I'm going to only pivot and continue to get better and improve. Or if that sounds too exhausting for you and you're like, look, I'm not interested in improving, Michelle. I'm tired. All right, cool. Let's not improve. Let's just appreciate who you are right now. Let's just work with that. Let's just sit here and acknowledge all of the goodness and wonderfulness that you have within already. You are not rotten like addiction tries to make us feel. That's a lie. And you are smart enough to be able to say, I see addiction for what it is. It's trying to manipulate me, and I'm not going to do that. And for those of you that are new, I say this almost every podcast, we treat addiction like a third person, right? So there's you, there's the one you love, and then there's this awful, evil disease that's like the mistress of your relationship, okay? That way, when you look at your loved one, you can see them as a separate entity from addiction. It's just a little trick I discovered early on. So you can love the person, but you don't have to love addiction. It kind of like simplifies and uncomplicates. There's two separate issues. There's the person you love and all of their potential and all of their goodness and the reason why you fell in love with them. And then there's this terrible disease that is just incredibly painful for everyone involved. And that's what you hate. And that's where your anger goes, right? That's what you need to separate even yourself from, because it's very easy for us to become addicted to addiction. And we go over that in the program more. So that's it for today. I know these are a little bit long. I typically try to make them 30 minutes, but hopefully you found something in that helpful. I, again, just want to end with a loving reminder that you've got this and that I've got your back. I am right here with you doing this through. You're not alone. I remember feeling so alone when I was going through this many, many years ago because I didn't tell anyone because I was too embarrassed. My family didn't know. I didn't want my friends to tell me I needed to leave my husband because I didn't want to leave my husband. And I knew if I told them what was going on, they would encourage me to do so. So I just kept it all by myself. And I thought, man, if I ever get through this and figure this out, this is going to be what I'm just going to try and let other people know that, we're going to break the silence, that we're going to advocate for ourselves, and also that it can get better, that this doesn't have to remain awful and terrible. And also, you know what else I wanted to do is I really wanted to make it positive, because so much, like, I don't know about you guys, but those documentaries about addiction, I try my best I research the heck out of addiction all the time, but I cannot bring myself to watch a lot of those documentaries because they're so triggering, so dark, so depressing, and they ruin my mood, but I can read about them. And so I can read all the books and all the scientific studies and everything of that sort. I actually today just signed up for a class, an addiction class at Stanford University, which I am so looking forward to. It's a course that I'm taking. So you'll hear more about that in the future. But I just want this to be positive. I want there to be hope. I don't want ugly, dark yuckiness. I think there's so many positive things that come out of addiction. It was the best thing that has happened to me, and so far for my children, and my oldest is 20. And so I think there can be a lot of great things. So that's it for today. All right, I'll talk to you guys next week. This podcast is created for your support, encouragement, and entertainment with my personal thoughts and beliefs. We are bonded together by the fact that we love someone suffering from addiction. This is not intended as a substitute for therapy or advice from a professional.